of that hurricane in Texas where it just parked itself over, and we're not talking about just a couple inches, but feet fell from the sky. And the destruction, and I don't want to minimize the misery, but when you look at it for what it is, it's just rain. But yet when it comes in such large quantities, look at the destruction. Now we see another event. It's now wind. And they said this was the largest hurricane that's ever developed over the Caribbean, and now coming in, it's a class 4? Is that what it still is? It used to have winds up to 185 miles an hour. I think they're down to 140. Down to 140. And I can't imagine the destruction. And then it's not just wind, but then it pushes the sea to the land. They call that the tidal surge, right? And so that's what kills more people, not the wind, but the people trapped in the oncoming onslaught of water. So, in his wind, what if was released something more devastating? Well, like the earth shaking. Well, that happened in Mexico. Because of our own home. But what if the fire added to it? I mean, we're just talking about simple elements, and when the earth is shaken or rain comes down or the wind blows, it's devastating. It makes us realize how fragile we are on this earth. How fragile we are. And hopefully it asks of us each to look into our lives and ask the question, why am I here in the first place? You know, is this just random events? And am I here just to put it here as a highly evolved animal, and then when I die, there's no remembrance of me? Or is there more to life than just my homes and my occupation and my pursuit of things? Because when all those things are stripped away, hopefully people ask that question. And they come to the foundational questions that really frame our life when we allow ourselves to ask them and come up with good answers. And that's why we've been studying on Sunday morning a series of lessons we call You Can Know Assuredly. We're looking at 7 or 8 things that you can know without a shadow of a doubt, and they're foundational to your life. They'll form your worldview, that you can know they're true. And when they are true, they make the difference in your life. And when you subscribe to them, it gives you direction, it gives you purpose, it gives you reason for being. And of course, the first one is just the question, is there a God? Because the atheist would maintain, no, there's not. We're just here, as Dawkins says, as a highly evolved being, and really life has no purpose, but we're living a meaningless life on this earth. And anytime you try to, when you take the atheist point of view, to come up with a cause, it's a cause or a purpose that you manufacture. It's made up. It's an arbitrary thing, because in the end they admit, without exception, that animals and we die, we're dead all over. Now that's sad if that's the only thing you have to look forward to in life. But if there is no God, it's a binary choice. Either he exists or he does not. That's all we have to look for. But if there is a God, and we can show that it's reasonable to believe in him, that's a game changer. Because then we're going to ask questions, well, why have you made me? What am I here for? Where am I going? And we'll look, Lord willing, next week how he begins to answer those questions, because he does speak to us and reveal himself to us. But we've been dealing with this basic question. It was going to be one lesson, and this is the fourth and the final one in this first question, is there a God? It's amazing. All the Bible writers, they acknowledged with their part of their soul that God created all. Jeremiah 30:17, O Lord God, behold, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and by your outstretched hand. Nothing is too difficult for you. See, it framed their whole attitude towards life when they faced trials and when they looked at just why they're here. It all pointed back to God. And that's why we have started with this premise that everyone knows there's a God. And the evidence has been provided to us by nature itself. That's why people of old who did not have the science we have today still were convinced that God exists. As Paul writes in Romans 1, that which is known about God is evident within them. For God himself is the one that made it evident to them, because since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his divine nature, eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen and understood. So that means all we have to do is look at the world around us, and we can come to the conclusion and know assuredly there's a God. And that's why we started with the cosmological argument, where it's the argument of first cause. It all had to start with something. And we showed using scientific principles that are not debated that it couldn't have been a physical cause that started it all. It had to be a non-physical, and we call that God. Something that lives outside of space, time, and dimension. He's a non-physical being, and that's what we call the spiritual. Then we looked at last week the idea of the teleological evidence, and that's the argument for design. Remember how it goes? If you can show me evidence of design, you know that someone designed it. We looked at a house. That's the principle. We looked at a watch. But then we looked at God's marvelous creation looking inward. We looked at the eye. We considered DNA. There's so much information packed in a microscopic cell, the chromosomes of each cell, that it just boggles the mind, and it's caused a lot of scientists to become believers because they know mutation does not create information. By random events, you can't come up with that kind of knowledge. And so there's a one I didn't share with you, it's the archer fish. Fish are fun to catch, and they eat bugs and they eat worms. But did you know the archer fish, it squirts water out of its mouth up into a leaf in a tree because it sees a spider or a bug there, and with accuracy up to 3 feet away, it can knock that bug off the leaf. Now, I've seen some of you guys spit, and you couldn't do that. All you do is get it all over yourself. And so National Geographic has a big article. We figured out how it does it. The anatomy of that little archer fish, that it could shoot with such accuracy and force to knock it off. Now, they can explain how God designed it, but they didn't answer the question, why did he do it? Why does the archer fish want to do that anyway? What led it to think, I'm going to start spitting? Because you wouldn't do that through mutation or survival of the fittest. It had to be designed, and we looked at that, and it's marvelous. When you look at how fearfully and wonderfully we are made, each of us. And as the psalmist said, my soul knows it well. God made me. Well, we're going to look at the last principle. It's the anthropic principle. And it's really taking the argument of design and looking outward rather than inward. And it's this, I'll have to confess right now, it's a good and bad. I don't know what I'm talking about the rest of my lesson. And some of you said, hey, I knew that all along. But that's the good part, because I'm going to let scientists tell you what I don't understand. They're going to make the point for me. So it's not about me. I don't have the PhD in physics or astrophysics, or I haven't worked for NASA. I haven't graduated from Caltech or MIT or Harvard, but these people have. And when you listen to their quotes and their statements, it's astounding that you can know assuredly there is a God. So let's look at the anthropic principle. What is it? Anthropic really in itself, you have to understand, means that which relates to anthropos, or man. That's what we are. Anthropology, the study of man. So it's relating to human beings or their period of existence on this earth. But when you talk about the anthropic principle, it's when you look at the universe at large, there's evidence that it seems to be precisely tuned for life to exist. They say, what do you mean tuned? Well, could you live without the proper material in Antarctica, the South Pole? I mean, if you just went as you are, could you live there? No, because the environment is too harsh for you to survive. And so the question is, when they look at the universe at large, they're saying, this is amazing. Everywhere we looked, everything's seemingly purposely designed and prepared for human life to exist. And so they go, how could that be? And so more and more, as the evidence comes in, more and more scientists say, there has to be a God. That's the only way you can explain this. Now, we're going to try to explain the principle, first by looking at piano. How many of you have a piano at home? Does yours sound like mine? One of those keys, you hit it, go, well, we have one. It needs to be tuned again. Have you ever seen someone tune a piano? I mean, I was always marveled when I opened the door and all those hammers hit all those strings. But then when you watch someone tune it, that is even more amazing. Because they take this wrench and they take it and tighten or loosen every string to the right pitch. Now, a good tuner can do it by ear, but they all use instruments to the right exact wavelength what that note's supposed to be. So when they're done and you play it, is that piano been finely tuned? And if someone said, boy, isn't that amazing, that just by coincidence plays notes exactly the way they're supposed to sound. No, it's been tuned to play the notes. When it's out of tune, does it sound good? No, it sounds like Jack's playing the piano. But when it's finely tuned and someone knows how to play it, it's a marvelous sound. And that's what they've done when they looked at the universe. They go, this thing is so tuned for life. And it's amazing. So, well, let's talk about how. So when we look at some marvelous features of the world around us, we're going to start with the earth. Then we're going to look at the universe. And we'll just look real quickly at the earth. We could spend the next hour just doing this. But we'll look at the size, the orbit, the axis, and the atmosphere. First of all, the earth has the right size for lots of things. First of all, for the right gravity, because if the earth was too big, or not big as it was, it could not have a gravitational field that would hold the atmosphere here on the earth. And it's also the right size. If it was any smaller, it wouldn't generate heat inside its core. And this heat, science tells us, generates a magnetic field. And this magnetic field creates the Van Allen radiation shield. So here's the Earth, and there's this radioactive or a magnetic shield around the Earth. And it looks like a donut. And it protects us from cosmic radiation that comes from the sun. And without it, you could not have life on this Earth. Did you know there's a shield protecting us, the Earth? Did you know that? You can't see it, but it's there. And it protects us, and it gives us... Now, the Earth is the perfect size to have that. Other planets don't. So then we look at the Earth's axis. We're tilted, aren't we? Now, I know some of you guys are tilted. I'm talking about the Earth is tilted, right? Now, is that by design or accident? We know it's the tilt of the Earth that gives us the seasons. And without it, you would not have seasons. And it's tilted exactly the right amount. And especially with the moon, it gives us tides and all those things. The Earth axis. Then you look at the Earth's orbit. Most orbits are ellipses. They're like big, long eggs. The Earth is more circular than all the others. They're going, why? And the reason this is important, because if it was an ellipsis, when it got way out of the end, it'd get too cold. And when it got really close, it'd be too hot, and life could not exist. But being circular and on an axis, this is interesting, most of the land masses are on the northern hemisphere. Did you know that? And they absorb heat. But when it's summer, we are on the farthest distance from the sun, and when the Earth is tilted towards the sun, so we don't get too hot. And yet, when we're tilted away from the sun, we're the closest to the Earth, or the sun. It's all precisely tuned, so it's neither too hot nor too cold. We have perfect seasons. We're not even talking about the moon or the distance from the Earth to the sun, or the size of the moon. Everything is perfectly put together to have life like we know it. The Earth's atmosphere, it's made up of different elements, nitrogen, oxygen. And if it varied, the combination, any of them, you could not breathe. There would be a suffocating greenhouse effect. But the combination of the gases that exist in the atmosphere are perfect for life. And they also shield us from those cosmic radiations altogether. Now, I just went through those quickly because I wanted to show you about the atmosphere, because the universe, it just boggles your mind when you look at it. when we consider that God has created all, that seems to be the only answer. When you look into the world or universe around us, physicists say there are 30 or more parameters that have to be exactly tuned for life to exist. And they cannot vary by any degree at all. And here's where I said I'm over my head, because here is a list of some of the fundamental constants that have to exist for there to be life here on Earth. It's the speed of light, gravitational constant, the Planck's constant, don't even know what it is. The mass of electron, the ratio of electron to proton mass, how many electrons to a proton. That number has to be fixed or you could not have life. The cosmological constant, Hubble constant, Higgs vacuum. He said, what is all this? And you know what it is? Right over my head. But they've studied it and looked at it, and they say these values are fixed. And when you look at them, if they were changed by any bit, one way or the other, life would not exist. Carbon-based life on this earth. On this earth. The universe is so designed so we could have life here. Now, so can you give me a couple ideas? Well, first of all, here's some quotes. This is Sir Martin Rees. Whenever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning everywhere. And it's so much so that here we see that David Deutsch, he's a physicist at the University of Oxford. If anyone claims not to be surprised at how finely tuned the universe is, by the special feature of the universe, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. In other words, to randomly happen. Here is Paul Davies. He's a theoretical physicist and he says the really amazing thing is not that life on Earth is balanced on a knife edge. In other words, it's so precise that Earth could host life. But he says the entire universe is balanced on a knife edge. In other words, if it was this way, we couldn't have life. If it was over here, we couldn't have life. And it'd be a total chaos if any of the natural constants, those ones I talked about, were off even slightly. They're precisely tuned. Now, you say, oh, show me some. I think I can swallow this information. It's not over my head. I'm smarter than you, Jack. Okay, try this one. Newton's law of universal gravitation. You understand that? I don't. But physicists agree that this is a constant, and Newton developed it, and it's been shown it's an empirical truth, or not, they don't have truths, but empirical. In other words, it's been proven by science over and over and over that when they do their calculations, when they're examining the world, when it comes to gravitation, they know this is the form you use, and it's constant throughout the universe. And it says if they were off by 1 part in 100 million, conditions would not allow life to exist. This constant. Now, 1 part in what? 100 million. Some of you like to build. You know, I'm talking about houses and carpentry. So you get your tape ruler out, and when you're cutting a 2x4, do you cut it to the nearest foot? No. You go to the nearest inch. No, not 12 foot, 6 inches. You go to the nearest half inch. No, you'll cut, depending on what you're building, to the nearest 1/8 or 16th, right? That's the margin of error. You don't want to be off an inch one way or the other. You want it down to a 16th. Unless you're building something that you don't care about. But if you ever build something where you're not 1/16th of an inch, you're 1/100th a millionth of an inch. Have you ever built something that's to that kind of parameters? And they tell us that's how the universe is tuned in this one factor alone. And if it was off any other way, we couldn't have life. That's stunning when you consider just the implications. Here's another one. You say, well, if that wasn't, maybe this is hard. Strong nuclear force. Okay, I read about this. I'm not even going to try to explain it to you. I'll just tell you what it says. The number must lie exactly between 0.6% and 8%, or no hydrogen would survive. There would be no solar system or life. Basically, it's the attraction between this nuclear forces, and it allows life to exist, and it's finely tuned, and there's the ratio. How about this one? This is Dr. Francis Collins. We've talked about him before. He said, he's the one that studied or mapped the whole human genome. Here's his comment on the anthropic principle and these constants. If any of these constants were off even by 1 part in a million, or in some cases 1 part in a million, there would not have been no galaxy, stars, planets, or people. It's that finely tuned. Here, this Frank Tipler, who was a confirmed atheist and now has become a Christian and wrote this book, The Physics of Christianity. He's a physicist, a professor of mathematical physics. And that's, again, here's what he says. When I began my career as a cosmologist, that's the one that's trying to study the origins of the world, how it all came about, the universe. Some 20 years ago, I was a convinced atheist. Never in my wildest dream did I imagine that one day I'd be writing a book purporting to show the central claims of Judeo-Christian theology are in fact true. Well, what changed you? That these claims are straightforward deductions of the law of physics. As we now understand them, I have been forced into these conclusions by the inexorable logic of my own special branch of physics. What's he telling you? When you look at the science and how finely tuned this universe, you have to conclude a God did it. Amen. Now, he's telling me that. And he knows so much more than anyone in this room put together, I would imagine. And he can look at all and examine the material where it's us. We don't even understand what they're talking about. He says, you have to believe a God did it. Science, pure science, good science, proves the existence of God. Well, makes it reasonable that you can accept that he exists. I'll put it that way. Fred Hoyle wrote this. A common sense interpretation of the facts, in other words, all these constants, suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics. A super intellect. He said, when you look at it, just couldn't happen by chance. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to be so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. You just have to accept it. And then so we're left with evidence that is so profound from people of the brightest minds. And they're telling us when you look at it, you just have to shake your head and say, God must have done it. No, isn't that what we've been maintaining all along? As we read in Psalms, the heavens are telling of the glory of God. And their expanse is declaring the work of his hand. He's been maintaining all along. The more science takes an honest look at the universe around us, what do they see? But God. And that's what the psalmist wrote way long ago. And nothing has changed. And any advance of science just seems to affirm the same. Well, the question I'm going to ask you to ask is, how does the atheist push back? If this is so strong, how do they push back against this? Well, they have a problem. And I'll give you their two major arguments. And you tell me, you decide for yourself if they seem reasonable. The first argument, when they says, the fact that we exist proves that a finely tuned universe could exist. Now, what they're saying is, when we're suggesting, the physicists and the cosmologists, when they look at all these parameters that are so constantly fixed that the only thing you conclude is a creator set them, and it couldn't happen by random chance, they go, well, no, just the fact that we do exist proves that it could happen by random chance. Now, do you see the inherent problem with that argument? It's circular. It's based on the idea that we know there's no God, and just the fact that we exist proves that it could happen by chance. Wait, that doesn't answer the question. We want to answer, why are they so fixed? And they say, well, just the fact they are proves that they are. Well, that proves nothing, and that's their answer. Now, you say, what are you talking about? Here's the answer. This was a philosopher countered with this way. Suppose an individual was in front of a firing squad. And so how many got there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 men. Firing squads are so designed to put someone to death, right? Quickly. And suppose this person survived the firing squad. would you all immediately ask the question, how did someone survive a firing squad when it's point blank range, and these are all trained marksmen, there's 8 of them, 1 person. How would you survive? You might say, well, did they all simply miss? Is that reasonable? And he said, well, the fact that he's still alive means they all missed. That's the only conclusion. No, there has to be another possibility, because that's not reasonable. They all missed. Is it? And so the other one said, well, maybe they missed on purpose. That's more reasonable, isn't it? Because I could see 1 missing, 1 hiccuping, or 1 coughing, but all 8 missing? No. It could be, say, well, their guns were loaded with blanks, and it was a collusion from the top down. You know they didn't all just simply miss. That doesn't happen. That's just 8 men shooting at 1 person. When you look at over 30 constants throughout the world or the universe, you can't just say, well, they just happened to be there. That doesn't answer anything. You have to explain how it happened. So let's go back to the second answer. Anyone been here in Chile? I know 2 people in the back. This is along the coast at Del Mar, Chile, Vina del Mar. It's a flower clock. And they plant these flowers to welcome visitors. And there's actually mechanical hands, but it tells time. Now, when you saw that, would you marvel at the designer's ingenuity and all the work they put into it? And then Dave comes up and says, no, the wind blew in those seeds, and that's just what happened. It grew there. No, and he said, well, no, what's your proof? The fact that it's there, that proves it happened. See, he's already ruled out the possibility of a designer, so he has to fall back on random chance. But it doesn't answer the question, does it? And so they come back, and you ask, well, how come we have such a finely tuned universe? They say, well, multiverse. This is the current popular answer to this huge problem. And you go, what's multiverse? Well, universe, what does that mean? 1. What's multiverse? Many. Guess how many? This is the theory now that one universe, it's too amazing. It just couldn't happen. But if you flip a coin enough times, could you get 10 heads in a row? Well, if you have an infinite amount of universes, not just 2, 3, not billions, infinite amount of universes. Now, when we say universe, we're talking about every star, every galaxy, every planet. That's one universe, as we see. They're saying there's an infinite amount of it. And so each one of these universes, they're laid out on a plane, and they go on forever and ever and ever. And since that's true, you know one of them would be finely tuned by chance. Now, do you have a problem with that? And they make fun of us believing in a non-physical being we call God. Because, hey, you can't see him. Say, have you ever seen any of these alternate universes? No. Can you examine them with a scientific method? No. Is there any way you could prove they exist? No. Well, why do you insist they exist? Because that's the only way we can get a finely tuned universe, because we just happen to be in one of the zillions, the trillions. What takes more faith? What's more reasonable? To believe in this, or to believe in a designer, a creator? Talk about faith system. Now, this is not all scientists. These are people that are committed to the philosophy of atheism, that they're committed to naturalism. They've ruled out the possibility of God, so they have to invoke some other system, even though it's fanciful, and it takes more faith to believe in this than it does God. And so, not only that, they have brain worlds, that they're parallel universes, that we're on one membrane or brain that is parallel to many others containing their own universe. In fact, since there's an infinite amount of universes, there's an infinite amount of worlds, and then they actually maintain there's an infinite amount of you. So someone in another parallel universe is sitting on a pew in another place that looks just like you listening to me. That's what they maintain. Not all of them, but some. And so again, where's the evidence for that? Zero. Zilch. None. Nada. And they laugh at us for saying there's a God. And you go look this for yourself and find out. That's why Scientific American, talking about the quantum multiverse, said it's the most dangerous idea in physics. Because it's not scientific. It can't be tested. It can't be proven. When we look at Atlantic magazine, they write about it and they say, the multi-idea is rotting culture. And here's a couple of quotes. The multiverse is a prop. It's a prop. It's a way to explain away things that can't be otherwise explained. We can't accept God, so multiverse. That's what they do. It's just a prop. There's no proof. It's not real. It's just something to ignore God by. And then they go on to say, what's more likely, a potentially infinite number of useless parallel universes or one perfectly ordinary God? I love that. This is Atlantic. It's not like it's a religious magazine at all, is it? There's Occam's razor, and it's the thought that the simplest answer is usually always the true one. And so don't look for complicated things. If everything points to God, accept there's a God. And so we have the anthropic principle. You can know assuredly there's a God. Good, honest science points to it. All you have to do is look in the world around us and you can see his fingerprints left on everything. And just like all the writers in the Old Testament and the New acknowledge the presence of God, we have to be those kind of people. That we understand the implications are profound if there is a God. I'm not just some biologically evolved being on this earth that here for a little while, then I die and no one cares. No, there's something more than this world than just life on this earth. And we want to cry and seek to God and find out what it is he wants me to do. What it is what is the reason that he made me for in the first place. Now, if he hasn't spoken, we have no answer that is available to us. And that's why, Lord willing, our next lesson will be that you can know assuredly God has spoken to us through his word, the Bible. But we have to be confident of that. But let me just address 4 things when we can acknowledge about the very character of God. First of all, if he's going to make everything, we would say he is all-powerful. The word they put on that is omnipotent. That he has all power. Isaiah chapter 40 asks this question, verse 25. To whom will you liken me? Or to whom shall I be equal, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these things, who brings out their host by number, the stars, and he calls them all by name. By the greatness of his might and the strength of his power, not one is missing. Here God is claiming he made them all. He's named every star. Now, do you realize there's billions of galaxies in our universe? And every one of those billions of galaxies has billions of their own stars. And so we're talking about trillions of stars. And the sun is a star, but it's a tiny one compared to some of the other ones out there. And we think of the magnitude, the mass of creation and the space in between them. And it says God created all of it by his spoken word. Would he be all powerful? Can he change your life? Can he be there for you in the time of catastrophe or flood or hurricane or earthquake? And when we say we believe in that kind of God, it's a life changer. We know not only he's all-powerful, but he has to know everything to create it like he did, finely tuned. That's why the psalmist said, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and my heart knoweth well. He is so intelligent, knows everything that's going on. He's named every star, and he could tell you them by name. And not one of them's missing. Not one of them has escaped his notice. Do you think if there's a God like that, he knows what's going on in your life? Do you think he's aware of all the little secrets that are going on and all the trials and the problems you have? And sometimes they seem so overwhelming to us, because they are. Because we're just mere men. But we believe in a God who created all things, who knows all things. And if we are willing to cry to him and seek him while he still can be found, he'll be there to help us. And it's easy for him to do so. So the other thing we realize that since he lives outside of time, he's ever present. We call that omnipresent. He lives in the past, he lives in the future. He can be on one side of the world, he can be here. And so sometimes we're fearful that he doesn't take notice of me. No, he's aware. He's present. And also we know he's eternal. He existed before the beginning when he created all things. And if, and we'll show this later, we've been created in his likeness, we're eternal people as well. And we have a choice to decide whether we're going to seek him out so we can live with him in eternity, or live separate from him for eternity. We'll develop those themes, Lord willing, later. But I just want to ask you, don't please patronize our God by saying, I believe in him, but then live a life as though it depends upon you alone. Don't say, I trust the God who created the heavens and the earth, that holds everything together perfectly, but then worry and be anxious in this world as though I have to fix things. It's not about us. It's about having faith in a God who can do those things. And that's why he does reveal himself to us, as we'll see in our next lesson. So God, I humbly apologize for my lack of faith. And I ask that you might increase my faith and you might make yourself known to me evermore. That I might know you, I might trust you, and I might be bold and confident for you. That's my prayer, and it's my prayer for you as well. We're going to sing this song. If you need to make your life right with Christ, what better time than there is right now? Won't you come as we stand and sing the first and last verse, Our God, He is alive.